Conservative pundit and Fox News host Tucker Carlson has spent this week broadcasting his primetime show from a curious location, Hungary, a country that stands as the modern-day example of how a democracy becomes an authoritarian, white supremacist, fascist regime. Now, on Monday, Tucker posted this tweet on the left announcing his show would air from the country's capital, Budapest, all week, and he included a picture of himself mid-interview with Hungary's authoritarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Now, tonight, he aired down a sit-down interview with the Prime Minister. And here he is suggesting President Biden could interfere in Orbán's re-election campaign. Take a listen.
When the President of the United States describes you as a totalitarian thug, which is a very serious thing to say about somebody, I would note, I mean, that suggests that, why wouldn't the Biden State Department work to prevent you from being reelected?
I think sooner or later the Americans will realize that issues in Hungary must be decided by the Hungarians.
Now, Carlson has publicly praised Orbán's government on Fox News several times, including in 2019, when he gushed over the Prime Minister's draconian anti-immigration policies, which are of the S-hole variety. Freedom House, which works to defend human rights and promote democratic change, says Hungary has, quote, dropped any pretense of respecting democratic institutions under Orbán. Freedom House and other watchdog groups don't even count Hungary as a democracy anymore. And Trump's ambassador in Budapest reportedly confessed that President Trump envied Orbán's ability to bully and suppress his critics, saying, quote, I can tell you, knowing the president for a good 25 or 30 years, that he would love to have the situation that Viktor Orbán has, but he doesn't. So joining me now to discuss the contrast and what underlies Tucker's desire to spend a week in Hungary is New York Magazine writer Jonathan Chait. Jonathan, what is Tucker really trying to do and give to his viewers with this trip?
I think he's doing something that's actually very sinister and very important and deserves a lot of attention. He's trying to set out an international model for where American conservatives should take their political project over the long run. In many ways, it resembles the sorts of arguments that left-wing socialists and communists made 100 years ago when they pointed to the Soviet Union as the model for where they wanted their political work to go in other countries. Leftists would go to the Soviet Union and say, I've seen the future and it works, and praise that regime. And that's what Carlson's doing. He's pointing toward an authoritarian future for the United States that they see playing out in Hungary. So it's very dangerous.
What is particularly dangerous about it, though? Right? What is wrong with the fact that Hungary's parliament just decided to give their president all the powers that they wanted?
Yeah, what's really so creepy about this is that a lot of internationally minded democracy experts for years have singled out Hungary as the model of what would happen in the United States if we would go down the path of authoritarianism. And the reason it's such a tight-fitting model is that they didn't have a kind of coup, or they didn't have some dramatic moment that a lot of people think of when they think of authoritarianism. They think that maybe troops would go in the streets and the Constitution would be burned. It's nothing like that. It doesn't happen in a single step. It just happens, inch by inch by inch by inch. The ruling party grabs more and more power. They stack the courts in their favor. They carve up the legislature in a way that the opposition can't win. They bully businesses and media to toe the regime line. And step by step, you reach a point where eventually it's not a democracy anymore. And that's a pretty close model for how you could do it in the United States. So that's what's really so scary about it. They've really got their eye on the ball. If they're really serious about this project of undermining democracy, Hungary is the place for them to look. So the fact that they've identified Hungary as their model is really quite disturbing.
What is it about their model, though, that applies to immigration in a way that helps advance the white supremacist agenda?
Well, the political messaging that Orbán has used in Hungary does dovetail in a lot of ways with the Trumpist wing of Republican politics. They've scapegoated immigrants for all kinds of social problems. They've also really put a lot of emphasis on blaming George Soros. George Soros is a kind of left liberal Jewish financier who supported a lot of pro-democracy non-governmental organizations in Hungary and elsewhere. He came from Hungary. He fled the Holocaust as a young man, and he's a big believer in supporting democracy overseas. And they've made Soros into the scapegoat for their ills in a way that veers right into anti-Semitism. So Trump has also echoed that theme against Soros as well. So between the anti-immigration and the sort of populist scapegoating of Soros, there is a real political overlap between the kind of messaging that you hear from Orbán and from Trump.
And now bring that home to how the folks in Hungary believe law and order should rule in a way that would oppress minorities here in the United States.
Yeah, it's kind of a classic example of the difference between the rule of law and law and order. Law and order means we're going to enforce the law against certain categories of people, often political minorities or racial minorities, people who don't have our favor, people who we don't think the law should really protect. Whereas the rule of law is really, a single set of rules that everybody has to follow regardless of who they are. And Orbán is much more of a law and order person, and so is Trump. So when they emphasize law and order, they're talking not about having a rule of law that really forces everyone to follow the same rules, which is how democracy advocates define that as an important value in the whole of democracy. They're just talking about using the iron fist of government to crush the wrong kinds of people as they see it.
Well, we certainly saw how that iron fist of government translates when it comes to law and order and the insurrection on the Capitol. So all of this connects, and we're just going to continue to connect the dots here on BNC so that we're aware of what's happening on the other side. Jonathan Chait, thank you for joining me tonight.